The rain started before dawn and never really decided to stop, just softened and thickened, like grief that had learned patience. Owen parked along the gravel road that edged St. Bridget's Cemetery and sat for a while with the engine ticking itself quiet. On the passenger seat lay the lilies Grace had always said were too honest for weddings but perfect for goodbyes, and he couldn't tell if that was funny or cruel. He carried them through the iron gate that always groaned like it remembered names better than the headstones did. The air smelled of moss and cold stone. The mud had the same stubbornness he used to love in her. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city or country in the comments. I read every one. And if stories of love, loss, and second chances mean something to you, please subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly helps me keep telling these. He didn't come every day. That would have been surrender. He didn't come only on anniversaries either. That would have turned grief into a calendar appointment. He came when the weather sounded like her, soft, insistent, refusing spectacle. He found the plot by feel now, could have walked it blind with the small tilt in the ground near the U, the way the path narrowed for 2 steps and then widened as if the earth itself took a breath. The stone was simple because Grace had said she'd haunt him if he chose anything ornate. "I want real words," she'd told him once, half laughing, half instructing. So he had chosen 5. Loved fiercely. No apologies. He crouched and set the lilies down, brushing rain from the carved letters like he could dry eternity with a sleeve. "Hi," he said, because hello sounded like something you say to the living. They were out of your favorite at the flower shop, but the woman with the silver hair said these would do. She called them Frank. You'd like that. He glanced at the little tin of river stones he kept tucked behind the marker, the ones he placed when he didn't have words. It was almost empty. He'd have to walk the creek again soon. He told her small things, about the neighbor's dog that had learned to open the screen door with its nose, about the car battery that had waited until the grocery store parking lot to die, about how the new barista at the corner place made cappuccinos like confessions. He didn't tell her the big thing, the thing that woke him at 3:11 most nights and sat at the foot of the bed like a polite ghost, that the house had grown too quiet in a way even sound couldn't fix. Across the cemetery, the old groundskeeper, Mr. Doyle, pushed his broken umbrella like a contraption he'd invented himself. He lifted a hand at Owen and kept going, leaving 2 neat tracks in the grass like the parting in a precise haircut. Owen raised his hand back, a mutual salute of men who had made peace with the rain's insistence on being itself. He was about to stand when he heard it, a hiccup of sound that wasn't wind, a little gasp, like someone holding breath too long and then being surprised to find it still there. He turned. At first he thought his eyes were inventing shapes the way they had for months after the funeral. But the shape persisted. Small, hunched beneath a thin hooded coat the color of wet slate, hair sticking darkly to a narrow face. The girl couldn't have been more than 8, maybe 9. She sat on the low edge of the neighboring grave in the next row, 4 stones down from Grace's, knees pulled to her chest, sneaker toes dirt dark, hands in sleeves. Tears and rain are cousins, but you can tell the difference up close. Even from here he could. He looked around for an adult, anyone with an umbrella or the posture that says, "I'm responsible for this kid." The cemetery had a way of swallowing witnesses. No one else looked their way. Mr. Doyle had disappeared behind the chapel. Owen cleared his throat in the loudest, careful way he knew. "Hey there." He kept his voice low, the way you do with birds. She flinched, then froze. as if the simple act of being seen could break her. He raised both hands, empty palms. "It's okay. I'm not going to—" He stopped himself. Promises are clumsy when you make them to strangers. "Do you need help?" She shook her head once without looking at him. "I've got an extra umbrella in the car," he tried. "You're going to be soaked." "I'm already soaked," she said, her voice surprising him with its clarity. British vowels hiding in an American rain, or maybe just school diction drilled into a thin throat. She sniffed, wiped her face with a sleeve that had lost the battle hours ago. "Fair point," he said, and couldn't help it. The ghost of a smile. Grace would have smiled too. He took a step closer, careful as if the ground itself had shifted to glass. "Are you visiting someone?" The girl glanced at the stone she was perched beside. A simple marker. Last name only, Kendall. A weathered date 10 years old. He tried to do the math. Grief and arithmetic don't often cooperate. "Your family?" he asked. She shook her head again. "I don't know where to go," she said. "I thought here would be quiet." Her chin trembled on quiet. He wanted to hand her a better word. "Cemeteries are good at that," he said, glancing back at Grace as if to ask permission. "My wife used to say they're truth-telling places. They don't pretend time is something you can bargain with." The girl's eyes flicked to him for the first time. They were that stormy gray that looks like it could be blue if it trusted you. "Your wife is here?" she asked. He nodded toward the lilies. "Grace." "Mine too," the girl said softly, so soft he almost missed it. He blinked. He resisted the adult habit of repeating a child's last sentence as a question. He waited instead. Rain ticked on stone. Somewhere a crow considered a sermon and thought better of it. "Do you want to sit?" he asked finally, motioning at the little patch of grass sheltered slightly by the yew. "You don't have to talk. We can just not talk together." She studied him with a seriousness that felt older than her bones. Eventually, she slid off the neighboring stone and edged over, keeping her distance but accepting proximity the way you accept a scarf in a wind you didn't plan for. They sat. He could feel the cold of the ground, even through his jeans, a clean cold that reminded you of ankles and choices. "What's your name?" he asked after the kind of silence that proves itself. She hesitated. "Ava," she said. "Ava." She stopped. "Just Ava." "Okay, just Ava," he said. And there it was, the tiniest corner of a smile. She tucked wet hair behind her ear, a gesture so offhandedly gracelike he nearly forgot to breathe. "Do you come here a lot?" she asked, as if cataloging the habits of strangers could build her a map. "Sometimes," he said. "I bring flowers she'd argue with, and stones she'd approve of, and sentences I should have said before words started feeling like heavy furniture." Ava tilted her head. "What sentences?" He looked at Grace's name and chose the ones that had been trying to be said for months. "I should have asked for help sooner. I should have said, stay home the day the doctor said the road would be slick. I should have insisted on chicken soup instead of drive-through fries. Dumb things. Big things." "She would have gone anyway," Ava said with the authority of someone who understood certain kinds of women. "Moms always think weather is for other people." He stared at her. "Moms?" Ava's mouth flattened, the way kids flatten their mouths when they realize they've said more than they meant to. He thought of how easily adults interrogate accident into confession. He refused the trap. "I used to come with my mother," he said instead, telling a small lie to stand in front of a larger truth. She liked the older stones, the ones with angels that look tired and names that sound like apricots. "She died?" Ava asked, directly, because children don't wrap boxes they'd rather open. "Years ago," he said. He spared her the whole catalog, left Grace where she was for now, a proper noun surrounded by air. "I learned the paths then. I learned you can say things out loud here that other places make you whisper." She nodded like that sounded like a rule she could try on. She looked down at her hands, at the bitten half-moons of nails, at the little scar by her knuckle where a cat had once negotiated ownership. "I wasn't supposed to come," she said, almost to herself. "But I had to see. I had to check that her name is really there, that it wasn't just a dream or a trick." He swallowed. He didn't ask the obvious questions. Who said you weren't supposed to? Where do you live? Who's with you? He knew the answer to the last one. No one. At least not right now. Not in the way that matters, which is when the rain is heavier than your coat. "Do you have a number I can call?" he asked. An aunt. A neighbor. Someone who'd worry right now. She flinched at aunt, winced at neighbor, softened at worry. "My stepdad works late," she said. "He doesn't like phones." Another mouth flatten. "I like phones," he said, showing her his like an artifact that could be trusted. "I have 3 people who would answer if I typed their names, and 2 who wouldn't but would call back tomorrow and pretend they had an excuse." Ava's laugh sounded like a secret deciding to forgive itself. "Do you always talk like that?" she asked. "Like books that forgot not to be poems?" He blinked rain out of his eyelashes. "Only when I'm nervous." "What are you nervous about?" "Doing the wrong thing," he said honestly. "Making it worse." "That's what the school counselor says," she muttered, "before she gives you a worksheet that smells like a printer." He snorted. "Not a fan?" "She said I should write a letter to my feelings." Ava hunched into the coat. "I tried. It just said, 'Dear feelings, stop.'" "That's a good letter," he said, concise. She looked at him like he was an adult-shaped loophole she could believe in for a minute. "You love your wife," she said, not a question. "Yes," he said, not a speech. "Did she love you?" Another direct blow. He smiled down at the lilies. Fiercely. With too many opinions and not enough patience and the kind of kindness that made apologies unnecessary. Ava nodded like she was a teacher stamping an assignment. She looked back at the Kendall stone as if it owed her a debt. "I never met her," she said so quietly he might have imagined it. "Not really. I saw pictures. I saw a video once where she laughed so loud the camera shook. But I never—" She pinched the sleeve between finger and thumb until the fabric squeaked. "It's weird to miss someone you're supposed to know." He felt something tip over inside his chest. Supposed to. A phrase that had ruined whole lives. He looked at Grace, at the rain shining her letters, as if the stone itself wanted to speak. He looked at Ava and saw an ache shaped like a question, with no punctuation. "Do you want to tell me about her?" he asked. "What you know." Ava shrugged without malice. "Bits. Everyone told me bits. My stepdad has stories that sound like he's trying not to say the sad parts. My grandma tells the same story about how she used to dance in the kitchen like the radio was something you can catch if you jump high enough. But when I ask who she really was, the shrug again. Grown-ups get tired. Yeah, he said, not to defend them, but to confess the ordinary cruelty of exhaustion. We do. The rain steadied. Mr. Doyle reappeared, nodded, vanished. The clock in the chapel tolled the hour like a polite throat clearing. Ava shivered. He took off his jacket and held it a little away from her, not draping it, offering it. She took it after 3 heartbeats and a measuring look. It swallowed her, made her look smaller and braver at once. Thank you, she said. You can keep it, he said, then amended, for now. Bring it back whenever the sky forgives us. She pulled the sleeves over her hands and glanced again at Grace's stone. What did she do? She asked. Like, for a job? Photographer, he said. The kind who made birthday cakes look like weddings and broken windows look like the sky had teeth. She said cameras teach you that nothing ugly is only ugly. Ava absorbed that with a gravity that felt like recognition. I draw, she said. Mostly at night. People think it's homework. It's not. It's faces I don't remember but miss anyway. He watched the way she said it and felt a pang so clean he almost thanked it. The face she didn't remember. Was it Grace's? The laugh that shook cameras, the kitchen dance, the stubborn rain. He didn't ask. He wasn't ready for her answer any more than she was ready to give it. A phone began to ring somewhere, tinny and distant, then gave up. The world resumed its slow rehearsal for summer. He stood, knees complaining, and she stood too, as if his gravity tugged hers. He picked up the empty tin, placed a single stone on Grace's marker, then, on impulse, placed one on the Kendall stone too. Ava noticed. What does that mean? She asked. That I heard you, he said. She blinked too fast, then cleared her throat like a small adult. I should go, she said, before it gets late. Do you want a ride? He asked. I can drop you at a corner you pick and pretend I never asked. She looked at the gate, at the slick road beyond it, at the kind of weather that presses on small lungs. I can walk, she said out of habit. Then, after a beat that felt like learning, okay. A corner. They walked in parallel, not touching, the way you walk beside skittish horses and freshly wounded people. At the gate, he glanced back at the rose and the you and the 5 stubborn words. In the car, he didn't turn on the radio. She held his jacket closed at the neck, with pinched fingers, like a cape that had forgotten how to fly. He asked for a street, and she gave him one that was a half-truth. He recognized the cross street she didn't name and didn't say so. When they reached the corner she'd chosen, she pointed to the little deli with the flickering E in DELI. There's a bus, she said. It's fine. He pulled to the curb. She didn't move to undo the seatbelt. She stared straight ahead. Thank you, she said, for not being weird. I'm weird, he said. I just try to be the helpful kind. She almost smiled. She reached for the door handle, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Anything, he said, and meant it like a vow he could actually keep. Was she kind? Ava asked. Like really kind? Or the fake kind people do at church? He felt his throat go tight in the old, familiar way. She had a mouth on her, he said, and a temper. But when she loved you, she made room for you in every sentence, even the angry ones. Ava nodded like she'd been given a passport. "Okay," she said, and let herself out into the clean, wet light. She took 3 steps, then turned back and leaned into the open door. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," she said, the rule arriving late to the scene. "But you didn't feel like one." "I'll try to keep it that way," he said. "Bring the jacket back when the rain forgets us." She shut the door, walked toward the deli, glanced back once. He waited until she turned the corner before he let his breath go all the way out. He sat there long enough for Mr. Doyle to shuffle past on his way home, umbrella defeated and triumphant at once. He stared at his hands on the wheel and saw ink stains from a letter he hadn't finished writing to a woman who couldn't read it. He thought of a girl with gray-blue eyes and a mouth that had learned to flatten too soon. He thought of the word supposed. He started the engine. 2 blocks later, his phone buzzed in the console. Unknown number. The kind you don't trust and answer anyway. He picked up. "Hello?" A small voice trying to be brave. "It's Ava," she said, and he had the absurd impulse to look around the empty car to share the news with someone. "I found your number in your jacket pocket." "You shouldn't leave it there." "I'm very irresponsible," he said, grinning at no one. "What's up?" A pause. "You said photographer," she said. "Was her last name Grace Kendall?" The world made a sound like brakes that don't scream but insist. He pulled to the curb automatically, the way training makes your body obey the part of you that's already in the future. "Kendall," he said. "Careful now." "Yes." Another pause that wasn't empty. Then, softly, as if stepping across a river on stones no one else could see, "She was my mom, too." The line went quiet except for rain. Owen closed his eyes, and for a moment, the old iron gate swung in his chest, and every name he'd ever learned arranged itself in a new order. He let the truth arrive. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe wrong. He simply held the phone like a hand he had just discovered belonged to him. "Okay," he said finally, gently, like the first word of a new language. "Okay, Ava. I'm listening." For a long time after the call, Owen didn't move. The rain outside had turned softer, like it was afraid to interrupt. The wipers squeaked once, then rested. In the quiet, her voice still echoed. "She was my mom, too." 4 words that rearranged everything he thought he knew about love, loss, and the woman he had buried. He had known Grace for 15 years, been married to her for 8, buried her for 2. He thought he had known her completely. Every laugh, every fear, every scar on her left wrist from when she slipped cutting onions. But now, this. He drove home in silence, his hands steady, his chest not. His house felt smaller that night. He sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp on, the light making the rain outside look like silver strings falling from heaven. On the table lay his wedding photo. Grace was laughing, head turned toward him, eyes bright. He had looked at this photo 1,000 times, but now he saw something else, a question hiding in her smile. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over the last call. He wanted to call Ava back, to ask 100 questions, but she was just a child, and he was a stranger she'd met in a cemetery. The only thing worse than silence was scaring her away. So he waited. He waited through the night, through the sound of the storm easing into memory, through the ache of a truth too heavy to carry and too fragile to drop. The next morning, he returned to St. Bridget's. The sky was pale, the earth still soft from rain. Mr. Doyle was there, trimming hedges with the precision of a man who believed neatness could keep death polite. Owen walked up to Grace's grave, half expecting to see a small figure sitting there again. But there was only the sound of birds. Still, he spoke aloud. "She was your daughter, wasn't she?" His voice cracked on the word daughter, as if it had been sitting in his throat for years, waiting to be used again. "You should have told me." The wind answered, moving the lilies. He let it. That afternoon, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He didn't hesitate this time. "Hello." "It's Ava," she said softly. He exhaled. "Hi, Ava." "I shouldn't be calling," she said. "But I had to ask. Did she talk about me?" Owen froze. "No," he said truthfully. "She didn't. But that doesn't mean she didn't think about you." "She didn't come back," Ava said. "Not once. Not even when Grace," her voice cracked. Owen's hands trembled. "Ava, I didn't know about you. If I had, I swear It's not your fault," she whispered quickly. "I think she wanted to tell you. My grandma said she almost did, once." Owen's throat felt tight. "How old are you, Ava?" 10. I'll be 11 in June." He nodded, as if she could see him. "You sound older than that." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I show you something?" "Of course." "My stepdad keeps a box in his closet," she said. "It's full of pictures." I think they were hers. Owen felt his heart start to race. "What kind of pictures?" "People. Trees. Rivers. But there's one of you." The world tilted slightly. "Of me?" "Yes," she said. "You're standing next to a woman holding me as a baby." She's smiling. "You're not." He gripped the edge of the table. "That photo shouldn't exist." "Do you want me to bring it to you?" she asked. He hesitated. "Your stepdad, does he know you called me?" A pause, then quietly, "No." He sighed. "Ava, you can't just, please," she said, the word trembling but brave. "I just want to know who I am." Owen closed his eyes. Grace's voice echoed in his memory. "Don't build walls so tall you can't see the truth when it arrives." "Okay," he said finally. "Tomorrow, same place." She exhaled in relief. "Okay." He wanted to tell her not to come alone, that the world was cruel to girls with secrets, but he stopped himself. She was already living that truth. The next morning was clear, the sky wide and clean. When he arrived at the cemetery, she was already there, smaller somehow, wearing his old jacket from before, sleeves still too long. "You kept it," he said. She nodded. "It still smells like rain." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like something your mother would say." She handed him an old envelope, soft at the corners. Inside were half a dozen photographs, yellowed slightly at the edges. The first few were landscapes, familiar ones. A river bend, a lighthouse, the hill behind their old house. The next photo made him stop breathing. It was Grace sitting on a porch he didn't recognize, holding a newborn. Her hair was shorter, her face softer. Her eyes, though, her eyes were the same. "She looks happy," he said. "She was," Ava said. "That's what Grandma said. Until one day she wasn't."
Owen felt his pulse thrum in his ears. Who took this? "I think you did," she said quietly. "Your name is written on the back." He turned it over. In Grace's handwriting, Owen, 2012. "For the day you'll understand." He stared at the words, at the handwriting he hadn't seen in years. "For the day you'll understand." The letters blurred as the tears came. He had no memory of taking this photo. No memory of that day, but somehow she had kept it, hidden it, waiting for a moment that only now made sense. Ava watched him silently. "She loved you," she said. "I can tell. Everyone who loved her says your name the same way." He wiped his face. "And you?" "She loved you too, I'm sure of it." "Then why did she leave?" Owen closed his eyes. "Sometimes people run from love because they think it's safer than losing it again." Ava frowned, confused. "Did she lose you?" He nodded slowly. "And maybe herself too." She was quiet after that, watching the light play on the marble. Then she whispered, "I think you and me both lost the same person." He smiled sadly. "Then maybe we can find her together." They sat there for hours. He told her stories, small ones. How Grace used to spill coffee on every book she owned. How she'd hum the same melody when she was nervous. How she once said she wanted to name a daughter Ava if they ever had one. At that, the girl's eyes widened. "She said that?" "She did," he said softly. "Exactly that name." Ava's lips parted, but no words came. She just stared at the photo in his hand, at the woman smiling down at the baby. When they finally stood to leave, the wind had picked up. He walked her to the gate. Before leaving, she looked up at him. "Will you be here again tomorrow?" He nodded. "If you want me to." She hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him. It was quick, unsure, but real. "Thank you," she said, "for not walking away." He swallowed hard. Never again. That night, as he drove home, the sky turned red over the hills. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't need to. In the passenger seat, the photo lay under his hand. Grace, the baby, the sunlight frozen in her hair. He whispered into the quiet, "You were right, Grace. I understand now." The wind answered, moving through the open window like a breath that had been waiting years to be released. Morning sunlight slanted through the blinds, cutting Owen's kitchen into strips of gold and shadow. He hadn't slept. The photograph lay on the table where he'd left it, the edges curling slightly as if time itself wanted to claim it back. He traced Grace's handwriting with his thumb. "For the day you'll understand." He whispered to the empty room, "I'm trying." The phone buzzed again. A text. "Ava, can we meet again today? Grandma said she needs to tell you something." He stared at the message, his chest tightening. Grandma. Grace's mother. That meant someone else had known all along. The address Ava sent was a small cottage at the edge of town. He recognized it instantly, the house where Grace had grown up, the house they'd driven past on their wedding day because she couldn't bear to stop. When he knocked, the door opened before his knuckles hit wood. "Of course it's you," said the woman on the other side. Her hair was white now, but her eyes hadn't changed. They were Grace's eyes, sharp and honest. "Hello, Mrs. Kendall," he said softly. "You always did talk like you were afraid of breaking something," she said, and turned. "Come in." Ava's drawing. Inside smelled like old coffee and rain-damp wood. On the living room floor, Ava sat cross-legged with colored pencils spread like confetti, drawing two figures beneath a big gray sky. She looked up and smiled. "You came." "Wouldn't miss it," he said. Her grandmother poured tea and handed him a cup, like it was an offering to history. "I suppose she told you," she said. "She told me she was Grace's daughter," he said carefully. Mrs. Kendall sighed, sinking into her chair. "Then I suppose the rest of it belongs to you." She told the story slowly, as if each sentence carried a weight too fragile to drop. Grace was 19 when it happened. Fresh out of school, bright, reckless, still trying to outrun her own sadness. She met someone. A man much older, charming, but wrong. When she found out she was pregnant, he was gone. Her parents, terrified of gossip, sent her away to stay with a cousin in another town. She wrote to you, Mrs. Kendall said quietly. Letters. Dozens. Everyone came back unopened. Owen's stomach twisted. Letters? I never got any letters. They sent them to your old address, she said. By the time you moved, she thought you didn't want her anymore. He pressed a hand to his forehead. God, Grace. She came home after Ava was born, Mrs. Kendall continued. She wanted to raise her, but her health... She stopped, glanced at Ava, then lowered her voice. Grace had complications. She was so young, and she nearly died. We thought we'd lose them both. So she left? Owen whispered. She didn't want Ava to see her sick. She thought she'd come back when she got better, but she never did. And when she finally recovered, you'd already met again years later, older, steadier. She didn't know how to tell you about the past. Owen sat in silence, his heartbeat a dull roar in his ears. She must have been terrified. She was, the older woman said, but she was also grateful. You made her feel alive again. I begged her to tell you. She promised she would. But Grace always thought tomorrow would be a better day to tell the truth. He let the words sink in. Tomorrow. That word had ruined more lives than any lie. Ava had been listening, pretending to color. Now she looked up. So you knew my mom before me? I did, he said softly, before and after. She blinked, thoughtful. Then maybe that's why she kept you both. One in her heart, one in her memory. He smiled, even though it hurt. She always collected things she didn't want to lose. Mrs. Kendall set her cup down. There's more, she said. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin brown envelope. She left this with me before she died. She told me to give it to you when the time felt right. His name was on it. Just Owen. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Grace's looping hand. Owen, if you're reading this, then I finally ran out of ways to postpone the truth. You once asked me what scared me most. I said losing control. That was only half true. What scared me was losing you the way I'd lost everything before. I had a daughter before we found each other again. Her name is Ava. I didn't tell you because I thought I could build a new life without bringing the old one to the door. I was wrong. You would have loved her. She laughs like you breathe, quietly, but all the time. I'm sorry. For every silence I turned into safety. For every truth I buried because I thought it would protect you. If she ever finds you, please don't let her carry my guilt. Tell her I loved her first. Tell her I never stopped. Grace. The ink had smudged where the paper had caught a tear long ago. Owen folded it carefully, like something that could still break. She wanted you to find her, Mrs. Kendall said. Both of you needed to. He nodded, unable to speak. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills, he drove Ava home. She leaned her head against the window, the fading light catching the freckles across her nose. Tiny constellations Grace would have loved to photograph. Do you think she forgave herself? Ava asked quietly. I think she's still trying, he said. And I think we can help her by forgiving her for real. Ava turned toward him. Does that mean we're family? He smiled, the first real one in months. It means we're two people who love the same person more than anything. And that's close enough to family for me. She nodded, content with that answer. When they reached her house, she paused before getting out. Can I come with you next time you visit her grave? Of course, he said. We'll bring her flowers. 2 sets. For both of us, she said. For both of us. She stepped out, the porch light flickering on like a blessing. Owen sat in the car a moment longer, holding Grace's letter in his lap. For the first time since she died, he didn't feel haunted. He felt guided. He whispered into the fading light, You kept your promise, Grace. She found me. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of laughter that might have been memory, or mercy. The following Sunday arrived with a quiet the world rarely keeps. A thin mist rolled through St. Bridget's, wrapping the headstones in silver. The grass was damp but forgiving beneath their shoes. Owen carried the lilies, her lilies, while Ava walked beside him, clutching a small bunch of wildflowers she'd picked herself. 2 sets, she'd said that morning, with the kind of seriousness children reserve for promises. When they reached Grace's grave, they placed the flowers side by side. Owen knelt first, brushing rain from the inscription the way he always did, his hand steady now. Ava stood beside him, her small hand hovering near the marble but not quite touching it. She liked these? Ava asked, looking down at the lilies. Loved them, he said. She said they were honest. They never tried to be pretty. They just were. Ava tilted her head. That sounds like something she'd say. He smiled faintly. Yeah, she was like that too. They stood there in silence for a while, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of things that no one needs to say out loud anymore. They began coming every week after that. Sometimes Ava would bring her sketchbook, sitting cross-legged beside the grave, drawing clouds or birds or the way sunlight bent through the trees. Sometimes Owen would bring his thermos and tell her stories about Grace, about his childhood, about all the small ways the world had tried to heal him without asking permission. Little by little, the space between them began to feel less like grief and more like something new. One afternoon, when the light turned gold and the air smelled faintly of pine, Ava looked up from her sketchbook. Do you think she can see us? She asked. Owen hesitated, then nodded. I think she'd make sure she could. Ava smiled. Then maybe she can see what I'm drawing. He leaned over to look. On the page, she had drawn 3 figures. A woman between a man and a girl, all holding hands, their faces turned toward the same soft sky. He swallowed hard. That's beautiful, Ava. She always drew people smiling, she said, even if they weren't happy. She said smiles make the truth easier to look at. Owen nodded slowly. That sounds like her. Later that evening, as he drove Ava home, she spoke again. Grandma says you used to take pictures too. He chuckled. I tried. But Grace was better. She could make broken things look perfect. Maybe you should start again, she said simply. Then we'd both be making pictures for her. He smiled at that, the kind of smile that felt like forgiveness in motion. Maybe I will. Over the next few weeks, Owen began to take his camera out again. It had been years since he'd used it, but the weight in his hands felt right. He photographed the river at dusk, the quiet church at sunrise, the small moments Ava kept pointing out. A ladybug on her sleeve, the reflection of clouds in a puddle, the way light spilled across Grace's stone. He didn't realize it at first, but his pictures were starting to look more like hers. One afternoon, while sorting through the photos, something caught his eye. In one of them, the one of Grace's grave under the yew tree, there was a faint shape in the background, blurred but familiar. A woman's figure, half in light, half in shadow. For a moment, he thought it was just a trick of the lens. But when he zoomed in, his breath caught. It was Grace, or at least, it looked like her posture, her hair, her soft half-smile. His first instinct was disbelief. But the second was something quieter, recognition. He printed the photo and brought it with him the next time they visited. Ava looked at it and whispered, "She's smiling." Owen nodded. She always was when she thought no one was looking. Do you think it's really her? He looked out at the graves, at the way the light moved gently across the grass. I think it's what she'd want us to see, he said. And maybe that's the same thing. Weeks turned to months. Spring became summer, and the visits grew less heavy, more like rituals of remembrance than mourning. They planted a small bed of wildflowers around the grave, lavender, daisies, marigolds. Ava insisted each flower should have a name. This one's Hope, she said, pointing to the lavender. And this one's Patience. And that one? He asked. She smiled. That one's Grace. He laughed softly. Of course it is. One day, as they sat together beneath the yew, Mrs. Kendall approached slowly with a small box in her hands. She looked tired, but peaceful. This belonged to her, she said, holding the box out to Owen. She wanted you to have it when the time was right. He opened it carefully. Inside were rolls of old film, neatly labeled in Grace's handwriting, each one marked with a date and a single word. Home, Light, Ava, Owen. Ava leaned in. Can we see them? Owen smiled. Yes, let's get them developed. A week later, they stood together in the small photo shop downtown as the owner handed over the prints. One by one, they looked through them, snapshots of moments both of them had never seen. Grace holding baby Ava, standing under a willow tree, Grace laughing at something behind the camera. Maybe at him. Grace sitting by a lake, hair blown across her face, looking right into the lens. And then the final photo. It was a picture of the three of them. Grace in the middle, one arm around Owen, the other around the baby in her arms. The background was their old house, sunlight pooling behind them like a memory that had refused to fade. On the back of the photo were 4 words written in ink that had barely faded. One day, both will know. Ava touched the edge of the print gently. She knew we'd meet. She did, Owen said softly. She always planned ahead of the truth. Ava looked up at him, eyes shining. Do you think she's happy now? He smiled faintly. I think she's finally home. That evening, they went back to the cemetery one more time. Owen placed the photo between the lilies and the wildflowers, anchoring it beneath a small stone. Now she can see us, Ava whispered. She always could, he said. They stood together as the light faded, and for the first time since Grace's death, Owen felt something shift inside him. Not closure, that was too final. Something else. Something like peace. He looked at Ava, the girl who had carried Grace's secret, and thought, this is what she wanted. Not forgiveness, but family. He took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs, and whispered to the headstone. You were right, Grace. She found me, and I found her too. The seasons had turned again. The wildflowers they planted around Grace's grave had begun to fade into autumn gold, their petals falling like tiny, polite goodbyes. Owen and Ava still came every Sunday, rain or shine, though now it felt less like mourning and more like visiting someone who had simply gone traveling and never quite made it back. On this particular Sunday, the air was crisp, the sky a gentle gray. Ava carried her sketchbook as always, but this time she also held something else, a small folded note. When they reached the grave, she set it down among the lilies and smiled. She gets one from me this time, she said. What did you write? Owen asked. Ava hesitated, then handed him another copy. I made 2. One for her, one for you. He unfolded the page carefully. Dear Mom! I'm not mad anymore. I used to be, because you didn't come back. But now I think maybe you never really left. I see you in the pictures, in the way the wind moves the trees, and in him. He tells stories the way you used to laugh. I think you'd like that. We bring flowers now, yours and mine, 2 sets. I think you'd say they look honest. I love you, Ava. Owen swallowed the lump in his throat, folded the letter, and placed it gently on the stone beside her sketch. She'd be proud of you, he said. Ava smiled. I think she already is. After they left the cemetery, Owen drove her home as usual. But halfway down Sycamore Lane, Ava suddenly sat up straighter. Stop the car! He hit the brakes instinctively. What is it? That house, she pointed. A small weathered place with peeling blue shutters and ivy climbing the side. Grandma said Mom used to come here to take pictures when she was sad. Can we look? Owen hesitated, then nodded. Sure. The house was abandoned now, the front door locked, the windows dusty. They circled around the back, where the old porch faced a quiet lake, the same lake from the photos they'd developed. Ava knelt near the steps, brushing aside the leaves. She used to hide things, she said. Grandma told me. What kind of things? Letters, pictures, secrets. Owen smiled. That sounds like her. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for that moment, Ava gasped. There's something here. From beneath a loose board, she pulled out a small tin box, rusted but intact. Owen's heart skipped. Be careful, he said, kneeling beside her. Inside the box were 3 things: a roll of undeveloped film, a pressed daisy, and an envelope. The envelope had his name on it. Owen! The handwriting was unmistakably hers. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single letter, written years ago, but still smelling faintly of lavender. Owen, I don't know when you'll find this. Maybe never. But if you do, it means you're still looking for me. And that means I didn't love you in vain. I've spent my life learning that love doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it comes too soon, sometimes too late. But when it's real, it never really leaves. If you're reading this, please don't let the guilt stay longer than it should. The world will tell you that love ends when people do. It doesn't. It changes address. Take care of Ava. Tell her that every photo I took was really a letter to her. And tell her I chose her name because it means life. She is my life. And you. You were my home. Grace. He read it twice before he realized his vision had blurred. Ava leaned close, eyes wide. What does it say? He handed her the letter. She read silently, her lips moving slightly with each word. When she finished, she pressed the page against her chest and whispered. She said, I'm her life. You are, Owen said softly, and she wanted you to live it. That night, Owen took the roll of film to the photo lab. The next day, when he picked up the prints, his breath caught at the first one. It was a photograph of the same lake, still, calm, peaceful. And in the corner of the frame, reflected faintly in the water, was Grace, not looking at the camera this time, but at something beyond it. Her face soft, almost smiling. The last photo, though, was what stopped him cold. It wasn't of the lake, or the house, or the trees. It was of him, standing by the old porch, camera in hand, looking toward the water, the exact spot where he and Ava had just stood. Except the timestamp on the photo was 10 years old. He felt a shiver run through him. It was as if she had seen this moment long before it happened, as if she had known that one day he and the daughter she left behind would stand together in the same light. The following weekend, he and Ava returned to the lake. They brought the photo, the daisy, and Grace's letter. Owen placed them carefully inside the tin box again, then set it back beneath the loose board. Why are you putting it back? Ava asked. So the next time someone needs to find her, he said, she'll still be here. Ava thought about that, then nodded. I like that. They sat together for a while, watching the sunlight dance across the water. Then Ava spoke, barely above a whisper. Do you miss her? Every day, he said, but it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It feels like remembering something beautiful instead of losing it. Ava leaned her head against his arm. Maybe that's what love is supposed to feel like when it doesn't go away. He smiled, his eyes glistening. Maybe it is. As they drove home, the sunset painted the sky in colors too soft for names. Owen looked at the girl beside him, her freckles glowing in the orange light, her eyes fixed on the horizon. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man haunted by the past. He felt like someone who had been led back to life by the very person who left it. Grace hadn't left them broken. She had left them to find each other. And somehow they had. When they reached the cemetery later that week, they brought 3 sets of flowers. Lilies, daisies, and wildflowers. Ava arranged them carefully. Owen placed the final photograph between them. The one of the lake, sunlight on the water, Grace's reflection in the corner. He whispered, You were right, Grace. Love doesn't leave. It just finds a new way home. The wind stirred gently, carrying the faintest trace of lavender. They stood together in the fading light. Not 2 people bound by grief, but 2 lives connected by the echo of someone who had loved them both too deeply to ever let them drift apart. I'd love to know what you think. Was Grace selfish or brave for keeping her secret? Was love her greatest gift or her greatest mistake? Tell me what you believe in the comments below. And if stories like this one touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like these alive. Stories about love, loss, and the ways we find home again through one another.